Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is just around the corner, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty excited. The Legend of Zelda is one of my favorite gaming franchises, and Breath of the Wild is my second favorite of the bunch. The fact that we're getting not one, but two more Zelda games in the Breath of the Wild universe is almost too good to be true. While the currently untitled sequel will most likely follow the usual adventure style that Zelda games are known for, Age of Calamity opted for a different, more chaotic approach. The prequel to Breath of the Wild will instead follow in the footsteps of the 2014 game Hyrule Warriors, which was basically the Zelda spin on the Dynasty Warriors series. This style of game features hack-and-slash combat that sees you fight hordes of enemies in an effort to achieve a variety of different objectives, ranging from capturing forts, to defeating a certain number of enemies, to taking down single targets. Definitely not your typical Zelda experience, but it's one that I think has a lot of potential for the particular story it's trying to tell. Age of Calamity takes place 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, and sees Zelda, Link, and many other familiar faces fighting to prevent the resurrection of Calamity Ganon. The story has Link and company battle wave after wave of Ganon's minions, which makes the hack-and-slash style of the Dynasty Warriors franchise feel more appropriate than your typical Zelda adventuring. With that being said, I can certainly understand people's hesitancy towards this game. While it may involve the Legend of Zelda characters and lore, it is not a normal Zelda title. If the Dynasty Warriors formula doesn't appeal to you, you may have no desire to play this game. I myself am not really a fan of the Warriors series, and I honestly haven't even played the first Hyrule Warriors. I've flirted with the idea of playing it for a long time, but I've never actually pulled the trigger. I was always worried that I wouldn't enjoy the combat enough and that I just dropped the game after only a few hours. However, when Age of Calamity was announced back in September, I was actually very interested in giving this game a shot, mainly due to the story. This game's story is actual canon in the Zelda timeline, unlike the one in the first Hyrule Warriors. Because of how much I love Breath of the Wild, I'm more willing to give this game a try, even though I'm still not really a fan of the Dynasty Warriors gameplay. To get a better sense for what the gameplay will actually be like, I decided to play through the demo that Nintendo released last week. After playing through it, I'm actually more excited for the game than I was before. My concerns about the gameplay were significantly reduced, and I found myself having a really great time playing through what was available. What I want to do in this video is tell you about my experiences and why I think you should be excited for Age of Calamity, especially if you're a fan of Breath of the Wild. The first thing I want to address is the story, because I think that's what has gotten a lot of people's attention. As I mentioned earlier, Age of Calamity takes place 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild. You will basically be playing through the events that led to Calamity Ganon's resurrection. The demo does a great job of introducing this story and giving you a taste of what cutscenes will be like and how much story content you'll actually get. I was pleasantly surprised by how much story content there was in just the demo. There were several fully voiced cutscenes that popped up both during and between missions. These cutscenes honestly felt like they were pulled directly from Breath of the Wild, which makes sense considering the game's development was overseen by the Zelda team at Nintendo, unlike the first Hyrule Warriors. That means the story was either written by or approved by the people who normally make Zelda games, which should be comforting for fans of the series. If you enjoyed the story in Breath of the Wild, I think you'll really enjoy what they did in Age of Calamity, at least as far as the demo goes. Now, I've seen some people comment that they're just gonna watch the cutscenes for the game when people post them online, instead of buying and playing through the whole game. The gameplay mechanics, which I'll get to in a minute, just don't appeal to these people, and they are really only interested in the game's story. I want these people to know that I understand where they're coming from. Like I said before, I'm not really a fan of the Dynasty Warriors formula. The only reason I'm giving this game the time of day is because it involves the Legend of Zelda. While I'm willing to look past the gameplay so I can experience the full story, other people may not want to do that, and that's totally fine. What I would tell those people though is that you might want to consider giving the gameplay a chance. After playing through the demo, my opinion of the gameplay for Age of Calamity improved significantly. I actually found myself really enjoying the combat and the different mechanics, which allowed you to use abilities from Breath of the Wild on a much grander scale. The demo allows you to play as 3 characters, Link, Impa, and Zelda. Each one has their own abilities and skills that are based on mechanics found in Breath of the Wild. All 3 of them can use different versions of the runes used in the Sheikah Slate, with Zelda relying more heavily on these abilities. Link has a normal sword, shield, and bow, as well as the paraglider he uses to move around the map. Impa, who was a lot more fun to play than I thought she'd be, uses a flurry of quick attacks and ninja skills, similar to what the Yuga clan used in Breath of the Wild. Her moves often reminded me of Naruto, even going so far as to mimic the Naruto run where you run with your arms trailing behind you. Each character also has combo moves and special attacks that are effective for quickly taking out large groups of enemies. These moves are often over the top and flashy, but they're fairly satisfying to execute. I sometimes wondered why Link had so much trouble taking on enemies in Breath of the Wild while he's a killing machine in this game, but that's beside the point. combat can oftentimes be very chaotic, with enemies flying across the screen and more rushing in to take their place. There were some small frame rate issues at times, but nothing that seriously impacted my gameplay experience. Movement, in my opinion, wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. Once I got used to how the characters controlled and learned to use the dash ability more often, I found it much easier to move around. After completing the opening mission, you're brought to this world map, which may look familiar for those of you who played Breath of the Wild. From here, you'll be able to select other story missions or choose side quests to earn rewards or unlock additional features like crafting. That's right, this game has a crafting system where you can fuse weapons together to level them up and create more powerful versions. You will collect different types of weapons as you play through missions, as well as food and other crafting materials. I don't think we've seen the full extent of how these systems will be used, but so far I think they're pretty cool features. The demo only gives you the first 2 story missions and 2 side missions to tackle, but I think it's definitely enough to give you a solid taste of what you can expect from Age of Calamity. These missions are repeatable, so if you do feel you need more time with the game to make a decision, you'll have plenty of it. I highly encourage you to give this demo a shot if you haven't already. Like I said before, I'm not usually a fan of this type of game, and I was hesitant about the gameplay. The demo helped put to rest some of these concerns, giving me something to look forward to beyond just the story. I still have some concerns about the gameplay getting repetitive, which is one of my general issues with this type of game, but so far I haven't felt that way about it. So why should you be excited about Age of Calamity? Well, its story promises to be as good as the one in Breath of the Wild, giving you more of what you love about that game's story. The game was overseen by the actual Zelda team at Nintendo, which means that both the story and the gameplay will be true to what you expect out of a Legend of Zelda game, albeit for a warrior style game. And finally, I think the gameplay is more enjoyable than many people may be expecting. Obviously, I don't have the full game in front of me, so don't take this video as a final verdict or anything like that, but what I've played so far is promising and definitely worth taking a look at.